Good morning, guys, and I hope everybody is doing well. So today what we are going to start is 5.6, Law of Cosines. We just finished Law of Sines. This is very similar. You use it to solve for oblique triangle angles inside. Oblique just means non-right triangles. Of course, these can always work for right triangles as well. The do now says, can the law of sines, so we're going back to what we just learned, be used to solve a triangle if only the given information is known? So they're saying for A, can you use side, side, side for law of sines? And we know that that is not true. So I'm just going to put an N for no, that is not true. What about angle, side, angle? Yes, we know we can use law of sines for that. SSA, we didn't talk about, we're not going to talk about it this year, but you can use law of sines for that. And then SAS, we cannot. So for those cases where we cannot use law of sines, what do we use? And this is where we're going to use law of cosines. Okay? And what does law of cosines say? Now, if you notice, it looks a lot like Pythagorean theorem, and this is actually law of cosines where Pythagorean theorem comes from. It says, let triangle ABC be any triangle with sides and angles labeled in the usual way. So all that means is we have a triangle, and we label the angles of a triangle by uppercase letters. So letter A, B, and C. So this would be triangle ABC. Now, the important thing here is when you label a triangle, the angles are uppercase letters. The side opposite the angle is a lowercase letter. So, for example, the side opposite angle A is side A, but it's in lowercase. The side opposite angle B would be little b, or lowercase b. Side opposite angle C would be little c. Okay? So this is what they mean by labeled in the usual way. And what the rule says is there are 3 laws of cosines, but there's really only one. The important thing here is the side. So say I am solving for side A. Now remember that's small a, so side A, I would use the first one. A squared is equal to b squared plus c squared, so the other 2 sides added together squared, minus 2 times those same 2 sides multiplied together, and then the cosine of angle A. So you notice if you're using side A, the only other time using anything A would be angle A. If I'm solving for side B, I'm going to use angle B. Everything else is A and C. If I'm going to solve for side C, I'm going to use angle C. Everything else is side A and B. So you start to notice a trend here that makes law of cosines a little bit simpler than just using these 3 formulas over and over. But you'll have these formulas anyway. Okay, and I'll keep referring back to them. If you feel like you need a little bit more reinforcement videos, you can find so many videos on law of cosines and law of sines online. Khan Academy, if you just go into YouTube, a lot of teachers have many examples doing this. It's a great time to look for extra resources if you need it and ask me for help. Okay, so our first example says, suppose that 2 sides of a triangle have lengths of 3 centimeters and 7 centimeters, and the included angle is 130. Find the third side. So there is one thing that I forgot to mention that I'm going to put here. Like I said, we're going to use law of cosines when we have SAS set up and SSS. So SAS and SSS set up for our triangle. So when we're given 3 sides or 2 sides and the angle in between, which we call the included angle. So if you look again back at this example, it says suppose that 2 sides of a triangle have lengths 3 and 7 and the included angle, the angle in between them, is 130. Find the third side. So I'm just going to draw this. And you can draw it however you want. I'm just going to move it over a little bit because it's getting cut off. And I'll just call it triangle ABC. And it doesn't tell me where those 2 sides are. So I'm just going to put my side of 3 and my side of 7 right there. And then the included angle, it has to be the angle that is sandwiched in between them, is 130. Because we need the SAS setup in order to use law of cosines. So now we want to solve for this side, find the third side. So we're solving for, technically, what is side C? So the important thing when you're using law of cosines is you need to identify if I am solving for my third side, I'm going to use my other two sides and my angle in between. It's also the angle opposite the side you're trying to find. So how am I going to set this up? Now this is a part you guys may find confusing. If you want, I call my triangle ABC. You could say, okay, opposite angle A would be side A, opposite angle B would be side B, opposite angle C would be side C. And then technically we're solving for side C, so you can go back and you'll know that you're going to want to use the third formula. The way that I always do it is I say, okay, I know that my formula is, I'm going to take if I'm solving from my side, whatever side I'm solving for goes on the left side alone. In this case, I called it X. If you want to call it C, you can call it that. So I'll call it X, and I know that's squared, following my formula, right? Equals. Now, judging by the formula, it's always, if I'm solving for my third side, it's always my other two sides squared minus 2 times my other two sides. So, it's my other two sides squared and added together, kind of like Pythagorean theorem, minus 2 times my other two sides. And then what's the last piece of it? The cosine of my angle that is opposite the side I'm looking for, which in this case the only angle I have of 130 degrees. Now the biggest thing with law of cosines is you have to be careful with how you solve it. In my calculator, I'm going to do a few things first. You can't just go adding all these pieces together and then multiplying by the cosine of 130. You'll get the wrong answer. You have to do it in a specific order. What order do I mean? So I'm going to add these together, and then I'm going to multiply these all in my calculator, and then in the meantime I'll subtract them. And I'm going to show that work to you now. So it's going to be x squared is equal to 3 squared plus 7 squared, so that's 9, plus 49 is going to give me 58, minus, because there's a minus in the middle, 2 times 3 times 7 is going to give me 42, and then the cosine of 130 in your calculator, make sure you're in degree mode, is negative 0.6428, and it's fine that it's negative. Now what am I going to do? I'm going to clean it up. If you notice, I have minus 42 times a negative, so I actually get a double negative, and when I add all of this together, I'm going to get x squared equals, it ends up being 58 plus 42 times 0.642. If you add that together, you're going to get 84.997, but now don't forget, to undo a squared, you have to take a square root. So my third side is 9.22 centimeters. Okay? 9.22 centimeters. And you can always ask yourself, there's no perfect way to check this, but you can kind of use common sense. A triangle's angles have to add to 180. So that means that 130, if one of my angles is 130, the side opposite that should be the biggest side. 9.22 is the biggest side. The others are 3 and 7. So this does indeed make sense. And we're going to do a few more examples. The next one we're actually going to solve the triangle. You can see how that's done. Like I said, if you need help, ask me questions. You can check my worked out notes online as well. And look up a few more videos if you're confused. There are so many for law of cosines. Okay. So I'm actually going to skip to example 3 first and then come back to example 2. So example 3 says a triangle has lengths of 6, 12, and 15. So we said the other case in which we use law of cosines is when we have a side setup. And this is what we have here. So I'm going to draw that triangle, and it is, I'm going to label it ABC just because it's consistent labeling. And my sides are 6, 12, and 15. So I'm just gonna, it doesn't really matter how you label them. So 6, 12, and 15. And you can kind of label your triangle however you want. They don't specify here. So what am I going to do? Well, it says find the measure of the smallest angle. So how do we know which angle is the smallest? Well, I want you guys to use some common sense here. If you think about it, the smallest angle is always opposite the smallest side. The largest angle is always opposite the largest side. So the way I drew my triangle, the smallest angle is going to be opposite the smallest side, which is 6. So the smallest angle would be angle B, okay, because it's opposite that one. The largest side would be opposite my side of 15, so that would be angle C in this case. And the medium side, the side in the middle, would be 12, so angle A is across from that. Of course, like I said, if you labeled your triangle a little bit differently, then your angle per se, it could be angle A for you or angle C, but you'll still get the same angle measure opposite the side of 6. So what am I going to do? I am going to use law of cosines to now find an angle. Well, this makes sense because if I have all 3 sides already, I don't need another side. I have all the sides. So I'm going to find angle B. So here's how we're going to use law of cosines. If we are solving for angle B, let's look back at the formula, and I'm going to clear this picture out for a second. If we are solving for angle B, we need the formula that has angle B in it, which would be the second one. So that means we're going to leave angle B as the variable. Everything else will be filled in. So I'm going to write out this formula. So the formula would be side B squared is equal to A squared plus C squared minus 2AC cosine of angle B. So we know all the other sides. Everything else can be filled in. We're going to leave angle B blank. So that's what I'm going to fill in at this point. So my side opposite angle B is side B, and that is 6. So we're going to have 6 squared is equal to, my other 2 sides are 12 and 15, so it's going to be 12 squared plus 15 squared minus 2 times 12 times 15, and then the cosine of angle B. And angle B is my variable. The weird thing is, how do we solve this? So I'm just going to clean things up. Anything that's squared, I'm just going to get a number for it. 6 squared is 36. 12 squared and 15 squared, so that's 144 plus 225 minus 2 times 12 times 15 is 360 times the cosine of angle B. Our whole goal here is to get angle B alone. Technically, the cosine of angle B alone. So what am I going to do? I'm going to move everything else away from it, which means that I'm going to subtract 144 and subtract 225 and move them to the other side. So I'll end up getting 36 minus 144 minus 225 is negative 333 equals negative 360 cosine of angle B. Okay? How do I get the cosine of angle B alone? Divide by 360, negative 360, I'm sorry. And you'll get 0.925 is equal to cosine of angle B. And we talked about this when we did inverses. How do we get an angle out? So this is just something you will always do it. Whenever you have cosine of angle B and you want the angle out, you're going to take inverse cosine of the other side. So to get the angle out, I'm going to take inverse cosine of 0.925, and that will give me angle B. So to get the cosine, so get the angle out of the cosine, you do inverse cosine of the other side, and it will pop the angle out. And if you put inverse cosine of 0.925 in your calculator, it will tell you that angle B is 22.3 degrees. And if you really think about it, we're finding the smallest angle, so it makes sense that it's pretty small. Okay? Like I said, ask me questions, find examples online, really make sure you know what you're doing, because after we finish law of cosines, we're going to have a law of sines and cosines test. So you really want to know what you're doing. Okay? And let's put everything together and go back to example 2. It says, and I think example 2 got cut off a little bit, but I will read it to you and you can see my blank and worked out notes. So it says the lengths of the sides of a triangle are 5, 10, and 12. Solve the triangle. So again, this is SSS setup. They're giving me all of the sides. So the sides are 5, 10, and 12. Now, I like the ABC labeling, so I'm just going to label it. You can label it however you want, but I'm just going to label my triangle ABC. So what does that mean for me? So opposite angle C is side C, which in my case is 5. Opposite angle A is side A. Opposite angle B is side B. So I know side C is 5, side A is 10, side B is 12. Try to label it like this to keep yourself clear. It says solve the triangle. So when we did law of sines, we talked about solve the triangle. It means find me all angles and all sides. Well, if I have all the sides, now I'm finding every angle. So basically, we're going to do what we did in example 3 2 times. Why only twice? Because then once we have the other two angles, we could subtract from 180 to find the third. So pick an angle to solve for first. I tend to always find the smallest angle first, just because, and then I'll just work up to the larger one. So I'm going to just solve for angle C first, which is opposite side C. So remember, if you're using law of cosines, the angle that you're solving for, the side opposite that goes on the other side of the equal sign alone. So it'll be 5 squared. The rest is the other two sides squared, minus 2 times the other two sides, and then the cosine of, and I got cut off a little bit, the cosine of whatever angle I'm solving for, which in this case is C. Okay? Now, I'm just going to clean it up, just like I did in the last one. 5 squared is 25, 10 squared plus 12 squared, so that's 100 plus 144, so it ends up giving me 244, minus 2 times 10 times 12 is 240, times the cosine of angle C. And what am I going to do again? I'm going to subtract 244 over. So I'll get negative 219, don't be afraid if it's negative, equals negative 240 cosine of angle C. Remember, you're getting angle C alone first. Divide by negative 240. That negative will go away. You'll get 0.9125 equals cosine of angle C. Whenever you're solving for an angle, you're going to have to, at this step, use inverse cosine, and we talked about how to find that in your calculator. Okay, it's cosine to the negative 1. If you need help finding that, you can look online or you can ask me, and I can show you how to find it. So if you do inverse cosine of 0.9125, make sure you're in degree mode, you will get the measure of angle C is 24.15 degrees. Remember, I solved for the smallest angle first, opposite the small side, so it makes sense that it's small. Okay? Now, we solved one angle. We need to solve another one. The only way to do that in this case, that I want you to do it, if you have another idea, you can ask me, but you're going to do this using law of cosines again. So I always, like I said, work from smallest angle to next smallest to largest. So now I'm going to solve for my angle A because it's opposite my next smallest side of side A, 10. So angle A, I'm going to use the side across from that alone on the left, so 10 squared equals other two sides, so 5 squared plus 12 squared minus 2 times 5 times 12 cosine, in this case, of angle A. Okay? And I'm going to clean it up. 100 is equal to 5 squared plus 12 squared. What is that going to give me? 169, because it's 25 plus 144 minus 2 times 5 times 12 is 120. And then cosine of angle A. We're doing the exact same thing. Now you're going to subtract the 169 over to the left side. Negative 69 equals negative 120 cosine of angle A. What do we do at this step? We need to get the cosine of angle A alone. Divide by negative 120. So we'll get 0.575 equals cosine of angle A. How do we undo the cosine? We need to take inverse cosine of both sides. So inverse cosine of 0.575 equals angle A. If you put that in your calculator in degree mode, you will get the measure of angle A equals 54.9 degrees. Again, it makes sense that it's a little bigger than last angle, but maybe not the largest in the triangle. Now, for the last angle, do we need to use law of cosines again? No. Can you? Of course. It's a good way to check yourself. But I'm not going to in this case. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to say, okay, I know the angles in a triangle have to add to 180 degrees. So 180 minus my other two angles is going to give me my third angle. So the measure of angle B would just be 100.95 degrees. Again, makes sense that it's the largest because it's opposite the largest side. Okay? You could, I would round to 1 or 2 decimal places for your angles. Okay? 1 or 2 is fine. Make sure you can always check yourself by using law of cosines on the third angle and making sure that they add up to 180 if you choose to do that. Good job today. A little bit of a longer video, but you have no homework after watching this video. Tomorrow, you'll have a few problems to complete and some practice. Good job. If you have any questions, check online or ask me.